Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, a channel about making computer role-playing games using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. In this video, I'm going to continue my series on converting the board game Source of the Nile to a computer game. In particular, I'm going to show you the system for fighting, and I'm going to show you a mistake that I made and how I corrected it. So I've set up an expedition and I've set off into the wilderness, and we've come across, as you can read here, we've come across a group of around 30 warriors. Now, if you've been following this series, you'll notice, or you might notice, that looking at these rolls, that shouldn't be 30 warriors, it should be 9 warriors. But I made a version of the game which creates 30 warriors so as to demonstrate the combat. The combat is too quick if there's only, small numbers of them. So that's why there's 30. And we are about to make our choice. And because I want to have them ambush me if possible, I'm going to make that as likely as possible by taking the most friendly and therefore the most vulnerable approach, which is approach the locals in an open and friendly manner. So let's see what happens there. And they were neutral. But let's try again. Once again, we come across a group of 30 warriors. Okay, so this time we'll ignore up to here because we've already discussed. These roles here are to do with their attitude and whether they charge or ambush, etc. And we talked about that in the last video. But let's have a look at this. It says we rolled a 6 and they flee after... Well, actually, sorry. It says they charge the expedition. That's the first bit of relevant information. It tells us that we haven't been ambushed, and what that means is we get a go at firing our muskets before hand-to-hand combat ensues. And so what happens with that is we have 13 people with muskets. We had 10 guards and 2 specialists and the player character, which means that we would automatically kill 13 of the enemy. And then, having done that, we roll to see whether they run away. And what happens is you multiply the casualties that you've inflicted, which is 13, by the roll of a dice, which in this case was 6, and we compare that to the number of warriors that are left, which I think would be 17, and the casualties inflicted times the roll of a die is higher, and that means that they flee. If it hadn't been higher, then we would have gone into hand-to-hand combat. Let's maybe try one more, and then we'll get into the code. So once again, we come across a group of 30 warriors, and let's approach them in an open and friendly manner and see what happens. Okay, so this is a bit more, a bit of a longer exchange. So again, they charged, which means that again we would get to inflict casualties with our muskets, which would be 13. This time we were unlucky. We rolled a 1, and 1 times 13 is a little bit less than how many were left, which would have been, again, 17. And so we get into hand-to-hand combat, and as you can see, it ends up being that we have lost the battle. You'll also notice that all of these are marked testing only. So in the actual game, like in the finished game, the idea is that you'll just get the warriors charge the expedition, and then you would get a message that you've lost the battle and what happens. You wouldn't get the sort of blow by blow. So let's get into the code, and then we'll go through what these mean. And sorry, I'll just lower that. Okay, but first, actually, I'll show you the mistake that I made and how I corrected it. I noticed this when I was testing the game this morning, and it just shows it's very, very easy to miss something. I actually have talked about this code and talked about how it works, and it all seemed fine at the time. And there's often little cases where it won't do what you thought, and really the only way to spot that is to just keep testing. Specifically, keep testing with making different choices if you can, so that you sort of see as much as possible of what the program can do. Let's get into sickness. So if you have been following this series, you will probably remember that at the end of the turn, if anyone's sick, you have to roll to see what happens to them. They can, well, there's a table here. They can recover, they can turn to improving, which helps with subsequent rolls. They can stay sick, or they can die. And what happens is there is a for loop. And the for loop starts at 0 and goes to c.length -1, meaning that it goes through, it starts at 0, which is you, the player character, and then it goes through every specialist, the doctor and the anthropologist, and etc., if they are present. And for each of them, it rolls the die, and it tells you what happens, and it makes whatever change to the code is required. Usually a change to the S array, which is or often a change to the S array, which says whether a given character is sick or whatever. So the problem is here. If you get over or equal to 5, then that character dies. And if Z equals 0, which means that we're dealing with the player character, it says you die, your expedition is over. Well, of course, because you're not taking a sort of bird's eye view of the whole expedition, you the player are meant to be specifically this one character. So if that one character dies, that's the end of the game. You don't find out what happened to the expedition. And we set P0 to -1, which is a special way of letting the computer know not to continue, and that comes into play here. It says if P0 does not equal -1, then we continue on with the game, because of course if you're dead, there's no continuing. Now this wasn't here before, and the problem is that let's say that you are sick, the player character, and let's say that there's a couple of other specialists that are also sick. So say you've got a doctor and an anthropologist. Well, because it deals with you on when Z is 0, if you die, it'll keep going through the loop. It'll then roll for the doctor, and it'll then roll for the anthropologist, and that doesn't make any sense. You're dead. How do you know whether the doctor or the anthropologist are getting better or whatever? So it should stop immediately once you die. There was also a problem that because I didn't put 2 line breaks, it put the answers, it put the new stuff on the same line, which didn't look right. But that's not the main problem. The main problem was that it should stop. It shouldn't roll for anyone else at all. So what I did was I said, in this particular circumstance, if Z is equal to 0 and Y is over or equal to 5, we set Z equal to C.length. The reason for that is because this is in the middle of a for loop, which is going from 0 to C.length -1. So once Z is equal to C.length, the computer will know not to go through the loop again. It'll break out of the loop, and then because P0 is equal to -1, this won't execute either, and it won't do anything else. It'll stop immediately once it tells you that you die and the expedition is over. But when I was talking about the code, I didn't notice that. I didn't think about that circumstance at all, and it seemed like the code was doing what it was supposed to do in the examples that I came up with, and it just goes to show that there is no substitute for sort of constant playtesting, I guess. You will be perfectly satisfied with a bit of code, and then you'll go, oh when that happens and that happens, this breaks what's meant to happen. This sort of breaks the game or breaks the code. So that is definitely something to bear in mind. But anyway, let's get on to the combat. So we've already dealt with this. This tells you whether they ambush or charge. We've already talked about that. It's to do with basically the interaction of a dice roll and your policy. The friendlier the policy, the more likely you are to be ambushed should they turn out hostile. So let's look at these what actually happens in ambush and charge, and I will deal briefly with the with these. These are the next things I'm going to code probably, but they are the possible results. So let's start with charge. So it's got a note here which says that y is the number of enemies. We set x equal to math.min ex7 is one of the possibilities. That's the number of muskets. Or ex5 plus p0 plus 1. ex5 being the number of guards, p0 being the number of specialists, and then plus 1 for the player character. So it's the smaller of the number of muskets or the number of people able to fire a musket. And that is the number of shots that you get, the number of people that are killed in the charge. So we set y, the number of enemies, equal to y minus x. If y is less than 1, well, we've killed them all, and we go to the result quick victory. There's a difference between quick victory and victory. Quick victory means that you won before it came to hand-to-hand combat, and victory means you won but there was hand-to-hand combat. And the difference is, it's going to be anyway how many specialists die. And this is something I have to make up, because in the original game there aren't any specialists. There's just you, and there's your what they call Ascaris and what we're calling guards. So I had to sort of make up, well, how do we, if we don't do anything, then the specialists would never die in a battle, and that seems a bit unlikely. So I had to sort of make up a procedure for making this happen. So the procedure that I came up with is, if it's a quick victory, then there's no chance, because how would they die? It didn't get to hand-to-hand combat. I suppose you could say that the enemy might have had spears or something that they threw, but maybe, anyway. Victory, each specialist still has a 1 in 6 chance of dying. The player character doesn't, but just any specialists that might be there. And then if you are defeated, each specialist has a 50% chance of dying. So those are arbitrary numbers. Once again, I might find that they are too lenient or too harsh, and I might change them later. They are just numbers that I chose, and we're going to, proceed with those and see how it works. All right, so back to this. So if y is less than 1, there are no enemies left. The muskets dealt with them. Otherwise, we roll a die, and because we're testing, we tell the player that that's happened. And then if W, which is the die roll, times X, which is the casualties inflicted, if that is greater than Y, which is the number of surviving enemies, then they flee. And it says they flee after you fire your muskets. And we have a quick victory. And if that's not true either, then we go through to ambush. So that's the difference between charging and ambushing. If they ambush you, then we don't go through this page. We go straight to ambush. If we charge, we only go to ambush if the initial musket fire doesn't deal with them. So we have another note to ourselves which says that y is the number of enemies, and we say Z2 equals the number of guards at the start of battle. It's used to check the guards' morale. So I've actually made a small change to this to this page, as well as setting Y equal to $ISI, which is the number of warriors, I also have Z2 equal to EX5, so it's the number of guards you had at the start of the battle. If you're wondering, by the way, well, why do we set Y equal to ISI? Why don't we just and then alter Y? Why don't we just deal with ISI directly? Well, the answer is because in the game, if you come back, the group, if you meet a tribe, move on, and then come back and encounter that tribe again, they still have the same number of warriors. You don't reduce the warriors based on the results of the battle. And the reason for that is that the number of warriors is sort of assumed to be, it's not assumed to be sort of the whole amount that they have. It's just that maybe larger groups have more patrols going out or whatever it may be. It's assumed that they're sort of replaced, and that's a sort of unit of a larger group or something. Again, something I might change, but it makes more sense in the original game because what they actually say in the rules is each encounter is probably sort of a typical, it's like an example of a number of encounters. The idea is that given the amount of territory that you're supposed to be traversing, you probably would go through many villages, and it's just it's just sort of a typical village of that type of people. And then when you come back, it's meant to be a different village that has roughly the same size and the same sort of strength. That makes less sense in this because we're dealing with individual sort of miles, and so it might make more sense to have the group, not there or something if they're wiped out. But anyway, for now, we're doing the rules as written as best we can. So we have Z2, which is equal to EX5. We're in ambush. So the enemy gets an attack. They roll a die. The enemy inflicts deaths equal to their number, i.e. how many warriors there are, divided by the die roll and rounded down. So we set X equal to math.floor $Y divided by Z. So if you roll a 1, they kill as many guards as there are enemies. By 2, they kill sort of half that many, 3, a third that many, and so on. So it's very swingy. It's deliberately very swingy. One die roll can make a big difference. Disaster, something can be fine, and then exactly the same thing can happen, and yet disaster follows. And that is a deliberate choice. It's a game in which luck, does play a big role. Some people like that, some people don't, but that's the sort of game that this is. And then we have a testing. Sorry, I should say math.floor just means whatever's within here we round down. So 3.9 becomes 3, etc. And then we have a note that says, they kill X guards. If X is greater than or equal to the number of guards, well, that's defeat, isn't it? For obvious reasons. Otherwise, we're going to reduce the guards by the number of casualties. Then we're going to roll for the guards' morale, i.e. our side's morale. And if Z, the die roll, times X, the casualties that they inflicted, is greater than Z2, the number of guards at the start of the battle, this is an advantage that guards have. The idea is that our guards are a little bit better fighters, and that their morale is much higher than that of the people that we meet. They're a lot more willing to fight and willing to see their friends die without running away. And to simulate that, we compare it to the number at the start of the battle, whereas they are only going to compare it to how many they have left at that point. So it's more likely that they will run away. So if Z times X is over Z2, then that's too much. The guards surrender or run away, and we go to defeat. Otherwise, so none of those things have happened. Our guards have survived, and our guards have survived their morale roll. Then we roll yet another die, and this is a roll for our attack. And then we set x equals math.floor bracket 1 plus p0 plus ex5 end bracket all over z end bracket plus 1. So 1 plus p0 plus ex5 is just the number of people who can fight. It's the specialists plus the player character plus the guards. Again, missionaries are considered to fight in this game. So we divide how many fighters we have. We divide by this die roll, and then we add 1. We get to add 1, unlike the enemies. And that's how many casualties we inflict. And then there's a very similar procedure. If x is over or equal to y, so notice that it's over or equal, another sign of our perhaps slight, better morale. If that's true, then they've had enough, and we go to victory. Notice that we go to victory and not quick victory, because in this we've had hand-to-hand combat, so it's possible that some specialists have died. Where are we? Oh, yep. So if x is over, if x is over or equal to y, we go to victory. Otherwise, we reduce the enemy by the number of casualties. We roll yet another die. We tell the player that that's what we've done. And then if z times x, the die roll times the casualties inflicted, is over the number of surviving enemies, then we go to victory. And we have a little note here. Note that enemy morale roll is based on surviving warriors, while guards' morale roll is based on number present at the start of the battle. Just because, presumably, to simulate that our guards are slightly more willing to fight, more sort of resigned to death or resigned to casualties and so on. And if none of those things are true, so we haven't wiped out the enemy, they haven't wiped out us, and we've both made our morale rolls, then that means the battle is not yet over, and therefore we include ambush, which of course is this page. So essentially we go to the top of the page. And we keep doing that until we keep going until one of those things is the case. One or other side is wiped out. It's only the guards that need to be wiped out on our side. It's not the guards and the specialists. But on their side, of course, there's no such distinction. And that will take us to either defeat, victory, or a quick victory. And that is combat in a nutshell. I'm just thinking that I could have, instead of having a 1 in 6 chance in dying, we could have a chance in dying that is the percentage of guards that died. Like if a third of the guards died, that could mean a third of the specialists, or each specialist has a 1 in 3 chance of dying, or I could just do 1 in 6 if we assume that perhaps the specialists will hang back a bit and sort of not take as much part in the battle as the guards. But that is for the future. So that is the system of combat that we're using. Probably what will happen is in the immediate future is I'll look at the consequences of victory and defeat, and then when we've dealt with that, I'll probably deal with what happens when the natives are neutral and no battle ensues. But for now, I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope you will tune in next time.